Now, the first trucks are being loaded with the Pfizer coronavirus vaccine before they're distributed across the United States. It's a glimmer of hope for many people in the fight against a virus that has been attributed as killing nearly 300,000 Americans. Now, there's a push to get the vaccine onto Australian shores as soon as possible, with some peak businesses and aged care bodies supporting compulsory COVID shots for workers. For more on this, I'm joined by clinical diseases expert Robert Booy in Sydney. Professor, thank you so much for joining me. There's been a lot of concern and alarm about coronavirus. Does it warrant a mandatory or compulsory vaccine environment?
In my opinion, no, but it does warrant a very high uptake. And if it's properly explained to the general public that even if you're a young person, there's a risk of you getting severe disease and an even greater risk of you passing it to an older person and resulting in really severe disease, then I think the great majority of people will want to have it.
Well, it's a case in point. There are many people who are deeply concerned about some of the reports in respect to the virus. Now, whether these concerns are justified or not, they cite such things as the rapid development of this vaccine. It's far faster than many other comparable vaccines, and they question whether the research has been undertaken appropriately. Are those concerns legitimate, or should we be confident in the safety of what's been rolled out?
I believe in being confident because we've never before had so many intelligent scientists working with such good technology. It's as though we've been able to easily telescope 5 years into one. It's not as if we've rushed anything. We're still testing tens of thousands of people with any particular vaccine to show that it's safe and that it's effective. And because of that, we can have confidence in whichever vaccine is being chosen and being rolled out.
Yes, it's an interesting discussion point, actually, is which vaccine is chosen. I know the Australian government has reserved supplies from 4 different potential manufacturers, but we also saw the report where there was false HIV positives coming from the development of a vaccine in Australia. What actually takes place when a vaccine is developed, and how does it alter itself or change the body's immune response system?
Well, what takes place is a lot of very careful study. There's different phases. A phase 1 with just a few people to test that it's really safe. Phase 2 with tens and sometimes hundreds. And that's where the Queensland University vaccine got to. And they found, unfortunately, that it was producing these antibody responses to HIV because there was a component, just a little protein from HIV in the vaccine. And so because of that, because it was interfere with normal medical care, it was withdrawn. It wasn't as though the vaccine wasn't proving to be likely to be effective. It was making strong antibodies, even better than disease. It was safe. But, you know, I feel badly as an Australian that they had to withdraw that. There are 3 or 4 others that are on the list, and we've actually ordered well over 100 million doses. So Australia is well covered. We're not likely to start until maybe February, if not March. And when we do, we'll have the experience from the UK and the US where hundreds of thousands, if not millions of doses have been given. So we'll have even more security about the effectiveness and also about the safety of the vaccines that are being rolled out in the UK and in the US.
Well, there'll be several very valuable months that I think will enhance the safety and security and confidence for many Australians. If I return to vaccines in general, we have the flu vaccine every year, and it's not always successful because the influenza virus tends to mutate or deliver a slightly different strain. Do we see a likelihood, or do you foresee a likelihood that coronavirus or COVID-19 may respond in a similar manner going forward?
Look, that's an important question. Both corona and influenza are what's called RNA viruses. That means that they're likely to mutate and to change their spots. However, flu is much more likely to mutate. While it's in your body as you have an infection, it can be mutating, whereas corona has a much better ability to copy itself accurately, and therefore it only makes a mutation on average once every 2 weeks or 2 a month. So we will probably be able to use the same vaccine next year and maybe even the year after for corona, which we couldn't do with flu.
Yes, it's interesting. It seems that coronavirus targets a very similar demographic. While anyone can get it, of course, it's much more dangerous for those with comorbidities or the elderly, the obese, the infirm, just as influenza is. So should a similar address of protocol for how we encourage people to take an influenza vaccine be implemented rather than a compulsory measure like has been mooted by some of the business groups?
Australians are open to protecting themselves and their family with influenza vaccination on a yearly basis. The one difference between influenza and corona is that influenza is also nasty to very young children, whereas corona isn't. For some evolutionary reason, corona only really affects older adults and people with chronic medical conditions. So that's the one difference. And so that's why we can focus with our immunisation campaign on those at risk with chronic conditions, especially in the UK over 80, but eventually people over 65, and then also people who are very obese and who are pregnant, and Indigenous Australians. There's a whole bunch of at-risk people that we can really protect very well once we get the vaccine available on our shores come February, March.
Yeah. Professor, finally, the government has ruled out or said it's not going to make this vaccine compulsory, but there are businesses that have suggested very strongly that it will be compulsory if you want to use their services. I'll give the case in point for international travel. Alan Joyce has suggested there may have to be a COVID-19 passport, a vaccination passport produced before you can use their airline. Is that overkill? Is that a de facto way of mandating people take a vaccine that they really is not necessary in many cases if they're not in the target group?
It may be a way to speed up the reinstitution of travel of people going on holiday into Australia. I'm not a big advocate. I've always found that if I was to explain something carefully, 9 out of 10 people usually say, yes, that's a good idea. I want to get myself protected. So I can understand from a business point of view, Alan Joyce wanting to be ensured that people have a passport, so to speak, against COVID, whether or not they've had antibody from being naturally infected or from being vaccinated. It may reach that point where we can only let people into Australia if they're showing evidence of immunity, and the tests are improving day by day, which show that you actually have immunity. So, look, I'm not a strong advocate, but I can see the value of it in some circumstances.
Professor Booy, thanks so much for your time tonight. We really appreciate your insights.